Okay, apparently I have had my mic off the entire time. Alright, well this has been fun. So let's try this again. So, hi everybody. My name is Sarah. I am the little solopreneur behind the Lapcraft Studio channel. So today is my first ever stream, so there's going to be bugs here left and right, i.e. maybe I should remember to turn the mic back on when I flip over. But that's okay. I have the suspicion that with this being my first stream, I'm going to be streaming to nobody anyway, so you get to watch me talk to myself. Anyway, so this week I have a video dropping where I'm going to be teaching you guys how I do some of the designing and printing of some of the little 3D products that I want to put in my store. And I'm going to be showing you guys actually how I designed this cute little 3D kawaii bee charm, as well as a cute little daisy. And I designed this in a software called Shapr3D. It is available on multiple platforms, including Mac, Windows, as well as iPad, which is really nice. That's one of my preferred platforms to use it. And when I was creating the video and, building it and showing you guys, it occurred to me that, possibly would help if we had some basics going on, just to give you guys, an idea of how it works. So that's kind of the point of this video. The point of this video is to sort of teach you sort of how to get started with Shapr3D. How to be a little more comfortable with the software. I kind of decided that I wanted to do sort of a Let's Learn series with streaming, and maybe if you guys want to follow along, you can. Otherwise, it's really just kind of me playing around, learning software, talking to myself if there's nobody here, or talking to you guys in the chat. So I am new to streaming, a little nervous, because I obviously really can't go back and fix all of my edits, at least not live. So please be patient with me. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave it in the chat. So let's get started by looking at the Shapr3D software. Now I have the subscription version, but there is a free version as well. Subscription wise, it is, if you pay yearly, it's $25 a month. If you pay monthly, it's $38, and it's a little bit steep in price. I completely agree with that. I do feel like it's one of the softwares that's worth it, partly because of a couple of different things. One being that you have unlimited projects, whereas you only get 2 projects if you're using the free version. Now, the workaround for that would be to create folders within that project, and you can just kind of, bank pre-existing projects. But one of the bigger incentives to that is if you're going to be exporting models, is that you're going to get only low-res exports if you're using the basic modeling, versus with the Pro subscription, you can have high-res model output. And since I'm printing things, that is a little bit important. It's possible there might be a workaround where you can kind of export some of the files and perhaps maybe bring it over into another software. I've not played around with that. But anyway, I figured I'd show you guys the interface, a little bit of how things work, and kind of go from there. So this is the home screen. As you can see, it's got all of my recent projects set up, or I can even just tap over here and it'll show all of my projects, things that I've messed around with. Down the bottom here, you've got some additional options. It's got some tutorials if you want to explore those. Workflow, which is kind of sort of following along with other manufacturers. Stories, manual, which opens up the manual. And then, of course, your settings. I do have mine set to the interface being on the right. The default is the left, and I do that partly because I'm left-handed, and it's just a little bit easier to manage with everything over on the right. So let's go over here. So I am going to tap the plus icon up here and create a new project. So when you come in, you'll get this screen, and you'll notice that it is basically a blank empty space. If you're familiar with any other 3D modeling software, it'll seem familiar. You've got an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis, and you can control actually how you're looking at things with this little cube up here in the top. And if you tap on one of the surfaces, it will jump to that, and that's really handy. You can even rotate it if you want. I find that really handy when I'm moving, particularly between sketches, or if when I'm moving items, sometimes it's a little better to move them on just a 2D axis setup rather than 3, because sometimes when you're moving 3, you get a little lost in space and things don't always translate. So, but there's that. You have a couple of options here on the side. There is magnet, and you can have things snap to, like the grid or sketch lines, sketch guide points, 3D guide points. So that helps when you're moving things around. I oftentimes turn snap grid on just because it helps keep lines a little more organized when I'm measuring. You've got here where you can change the units. I usually work in millimeters because with 3D printing you're often working in millimeters. You can actually lock the grid size, and what that means is it's like as you're zooming in, you'll notice this number changes. So now suddenly each of these blocks is 1 millimeter versus the 5 that it was here, and then 10, and you can go all the way out. But if you didn't want that to be any different, you could actually lock it, and then when you go to zoom in, it stays that way. So that's kind of a neat function. And of course you've got the ability to, if you want to just jump to a specific view, you can also do it this way versus using the little, I think it's a gizmo, is what they call it in Blender. So, but yeah, you can flip around a little bit. Oh, and you can even lock the grid position as well. Cool. So there's that. And then this item up here flips you between the option for modeling and visualization, because when you have items here in Shapr, you can actually color them and add materials. Of course, it's like, you don't have anything, what do you want me to do it with? So once we get models in here, I'll be able to show you. So, and then on the opposite side here we have all of our tools: sketch, add, transform, which opens up to some various options, the tools item, which opens up to various options, and I'll kind of explain these as I go. And then over here we have basically our layers panel, which shows everything that's you've got access to within this space. So Shapr3D is what's known as CAD modeling software, and that is where you work often with a 2D sketch and then can from there create 3D objects. So let me give you a little bit of an example. So I'm gonna flip over here to the top view, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a sketch. So in Shapr you can do it two ways. You can either tap the add sketch button, or often you can just start drawing and it will automatically open up that sketch. So, and it has a couple of intuitive tools, this being the line art tool. So for instance, I can just literally draw a line and it will start. I'm just kind of randomly playing around, not really drawing anything specific, but it will do both line as well as a circle or an arc if you kind of give yourself sort of a flick of your wrist in the beginning. Now there are also options to work with what's known as the spline tool, and this is a line that has sort of these points that as you go and kind of draw and hold for second and press will create these little articulating points that let you then move it around to kind of change the design of the curve. So for example, I've got this line that I drew. I can then tap on these points and move them around to change the curve and its form. So this is with the method called control. Now there's also a method called fit, which lets you draw, but it leaves the points on the curve. And then from there you can kind of play with these beziers that you often see in programs like Affinity or Illustrator, View. But you can't, or at least I can't seem to figure out any way to move just one at a time. But you do have some options to curve or to break it. So personally, I like to really use the control method a little bit more. I just find that more intuitive for me, but both are a set of options. So in addition to doing curves, there are other things you can do. You can design rectangles, and you can even start a rectangle multiple ways. You can provide it with 3 points, a diagonal, or a center. I usually use diagonal, where it's like I press and I'll start drawing from one point, and then I have the other corner and I can draw it however I want. And you'll notice that because I've got the grid snapping on, it'll snap to these points. So that's kind of why I leave that on. It helps keep things measured, helps with measurements a little better. But even if I didn't have something exactly, like for instance, say maybe I wanted this to be a square, I can actually tap the measurements and put them in exactly how I want them, and it will lock that in place. And it will typically keep that measurement as a result. Let me give you a better example of that. So say I've got a bigger rectangle, and say I want to draw a couple of lines in here. I want to put a line here, and I want to put a line here. And I want these measurements to kind of be, basically I want these 3 points to be equal, and right now they're not. Now with this having just drawn one whole line, it thinks it's all one line, but I can actually use, if I go down here to the bottom right corner, the measure tool, I can actually tap a point and draw, well no, not if I hold the point. I can actually tap and draw one point, and I can tap and draw another point, and I can tap and draw another point. So by doing that, I've got these different measurements You see. Oh, why is it acting that way? 40, 45, 40. Okay. So say I want these all to be even. So this is 40, this one's 45, this one's 40 as well. So I want these to all kind of be the same. Or I want these two to stay the same. So I'm going to tap, I can actually select multiple lines, and I can tap equal over here, and then suddenly these two lines become equal in size, and they're connected as a result. So I want these two to be equal, I can then tap and make that equal as well. And now these three lines are equal in result. So that's one of the examples of some of the constraints you can do with the kind of CAD modeling. So there's other constraints that you can do as well. For instance, I've got, let me tap that one off. So I've got this line and I've got this line. You'll notice there's a little icon here that shows that at least for this angle, it is a right angle. But then over here, it says it's 90.365. And I want these to actually be perpendicular. So I can tap that and create a perpendicular line. And now it's definitely 90 degrees. And these definitely play a role when you're really wanting to do more accurate modeling. So especially when you're designing machine parts and such, that can play a role. And there's lots of different things that you can do with this. For instance, if I were to tap this and say maybe this shape, I can create some things up so that they're tangent, and it's made this circle so it's connecting and creating a line here. There are a couple of other different options. Also, anything you tap, you have to tap back off usually, or at least tap somewhere off in the screen. So, but there's lots of different ways to kind of create constraint settings. And you can even set it up to kind of auto constrain to make your life a little easier. But things like parallel, perpendicular, tangent, coincident, midpoint, concentric, a lot of these are more CAD software based. With sort of the design work I do, I don't necessarily go all the way into engineering drawing, I guess would be the way to put it, because I work a little bit more on the artistic end of things. So these tools are here, you don't have to use them if you don't want to. So, but to give you an example, you've seen that you can draw a circle. You can also just draw a circle and start from the center. And this is good a lot of times, and of course you can like declare how big the radius is. You can do this with an ellipse as well. And this is where you actually are given two radiuses. So like for instance, say maybe I want this one to be 35, and then there we go. If I tap it, I can then say I want this one to maybe be 70. So now it's a perfect kind of 2-to-1. And you can lock these if you want to. When you put it in, it usually locks, but you can always tap back out to edit it again. You have the ability to create polygons and, you know, everything from a triangle to an octagon if you're trying to create a multi-sided shape. And then there's some other tools here, offset edge. And offsetting an edge, like for instance, if I were to grab this circle here and I wanted to offset it, an offset edge lets you basically, you can either do a single or you can do a loop. Since this is a circle, it's going to kind of act as a loop anyway, but it lets you pull out or pull in a new circle. And this is really good if you're making like curved items, so like, you know, circles, or eyes would be the example that I use in my video Friday. But by doing that, it will kind of be evenly spaced, rather than you trying to maybe duplicate and sliding down. That doesn't always work. It doesn't always look perfectly even. So that is an option. Of course, you have the ability to move any of your sketches around, rotate. Well, can't really tell with the circle. Let me grab this one. If I do move, there you go, rotate. You can rotate on an angle. And then some other things that you can do is you can actually pattern. So for instance, say I've got this circle here, and I want to maybe create a pattern. So I select a sketch, and then I have the ability to do it either in a circular pattern or a linear pattern. So I'll start with linear, and say I want maybe a total quantity of, let's go with 9. I can then select up how far I want, and go over, and that'll tell you, like, for instance, okay, it's going over 3 and it's going over 9. Well, maybe I want to make like a 3 by 3. There we go. And so now I've got a little grid of these shapes rather than having to draw all of them individually. I could also do that with, say, grab this one and I want to do like maybe a circular pattern. Grab the shape that I want. You can even do it in just individual lines versus, but if you double tap, we'll grab the whole shape and say I want maybe, let's go with 10. And then I can put it on an angle. At least I'm supposed to. Wonder why it's acting that way. Uniform, rotate it. Oh, here we go. And then total angle. There we go. So you can even do it with lines if you're trying to create, I don't know, some type of weird shape. I don't use the rotations a whole lot, but a lot of times what I'm doing, if I'm not constructing in here, I will actually bring in a vector image that I can then use if I'm doing specifically like things such as some of my signs, like my 3D printed signs. And let me give you an example. So first of all, let's kind of clear out, tap off real quick. I'm going to clear out all my sketches just to empty things out. So you have the ability to bring in sketches or images to work with. If you tap add, you have the ability to add an image or a file. Now, an image does just like that. It will bring in an image, and you can do it from photos or files. I think this was my image that I used on my bee product sketch, and this is where I drew my little bee, my 3D bee charm. I drew it from all different sides, and that helps to then model. So, but I can put it wherever I want on the board. I can then lower the opacity so it doesn't bother me. And I can bring that in, and I can tap done, and then once I'm there, I can essentially draw on top of it to create my model, which I'll show in Friday's video. I'm not going to use that as an example today. But what I can also do is I can actually bring in files, and this can include images, but it also can include other 3D shapes or vector sketches, provided you're bringing them in DXF or DWG. That is my one complaint with Shapr, and I don't quite know why it hasn't added it. So the Shapr team's listing adding SVGs would be a great addition, because you can do it with software like Fusion 360, Autodesk Fusion 360 on the computer. You can bring those in. Have a cat underneath me. But DXF files work pretty well. Those you can actually either export out of Illustrator, or Affinity Designers recently added that option. It works okay. Otherwise, you can convert any SVG online with the free converter. Some work better than others. You might have to play around. But to give you an example, so I'm going to go in here, and I think I have, let's see, Yeah, so you can see I've got my logo that I did in SVG, and should have DXF. Did I get rid of it already? I hope not. Well, it'll give me an example to show you guys. So I've got an SVG file that I want to bring in here, and if I tap it, it gets mad. It says it's not supported yet, so fingers crossed. So what you can do instead is you can actually convert it. I'm going to flip over here to, there's a bunch of different converters online. This one personally I found actually did a really good job with creating a DXF file. So I'm going to go over here, choose files, and I'm going to pull my main logo. Alright, and I'm going to have it convert to a DXF. Let it think about it real quick. There we go. I'll let it download. Alright, let's go back over to Shapr. Now I should be able to see it in my downloads. There it is. Main logo, DXF. Alright. And I'm going to specify millimeters as my imported unit. Bingo! Now, this is the SVG that I created over in Affinity, and it's brought in all these little individual lines. It sees everything, and all of these have become sketches, which is really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and click done. So it's brought it in. Now, if I don't want all of it, like for instance, it's got the exterior background on it, I can change that. I can go into my sketches. I'm going to jump so it's flat here. And I can change all of this. You can use the trim tool, and I can just trim this out by tapping on these lines. And suddenly now it's no longer a problem. And I've got all these here, but I kind of want them to be there. I'm going to need those for shapes here in the future. So this kind of is what I want to work with. So alright, so this is, so I've got this really nice sketch. I haven't had to worry about drawing it in here. I can just bring it in from whatever I've used before. And a lot of times when I'm doing like flat jewelry charms, or if I'm making my 3D printed signs, I will often do that. I'll often bring in shapes already that I've created over in another vector software and bring them into here this way. Because a lot of times I just really want to make them more thicker, if you will. I want them to be, have some height to them. And it's just easier to do that rather than trying to do all this intricate detail work over here in CAD software. So this is a really good way to do that. So for instance, I want to, let's say I'm making this as a sign. I'm going to want the base of it at the very least to be, let's say 3 millimeters, and I want the entire base to be 3 millimeters. Sometimes it helps to think about it a little bit. So I want there to be this background layer here. I want it to be about 3 millimeters in height. Then I want the letters themselves, these letters themselves to be maybe another 3 millimeters on top of that. And then I've got, my little Cthulhu mascot and my studio words here that I want to bring in, and maybe I want that to be another 3 millimeters beyond that. So it always helps to kind of think about it a little bit before you're doing it. So that would be a total of like 9 millimeters. So I am going to, or if I wanted this to be a keychain, I could have this be 3 millimeters, or I could have the background be 3 millimeters, and I could have the letters and everything else be 6 millimeters. So there's different ways to go about doing that, but ultimately I want to make everything a bit thicker. So what I'm going to do is you can, if you tap on the outside, you can actually drag to select everything. And I can either, if I drag downwards, it grabs anything that like I've completely covered. Or if you do it the opposite way, oops, make sure I'm out of sketch mode. The opposite way, make sure you press and hold. It's going to, as long as you're touching it, it's going to grab everything. So, and you can also control what you're grabbing. For instance, this is grabbing everything. Well, I actually just really want it to grab the faces, because the faces are what we're going to bring up. I don't want it to necessarily be grabbing the lines, but when you see I do that, as long as you're just touching it, drawing that way, it's going to grab it, versus if I'm going from this direction, you have to make sure you're all the way over. So, alright, so I've got everything. So I want, and what's really nice with Shapr3D and most CAD software, extruding is a really big thing. So they try to make it very easy. So once you have it selected, you're going to be automatically given the option with these arrows to pull it up. It automatically kind of jumps to extrude. So, and that is as simple as just grabbing and pulling. There we go. And it has to, it's a lot of sketches, so it has to think for a moment. Come on. There we go. But then I can tell it how big I want it, since I just want it to be 3. Depending on how complex your model is, sometimes this has to wait and think about it for a little bit. There we go. And if you wanted to, it could even like shift the angle of which way it's extruding, but I usually leave that at 0. So I'm gonna tap off. All right. So now, as you can see, I've got this big old shape. You can still see the sketch, which is actually laying on the plane down here. And if I were to actually try and grab the sketches, it's going to actually grab the face of this object. Yeah, sometimes I get like weird phantom shapes and I don't know why, so I'm just going to take a moment and I'm just going to delete that. Anyway, so this is my main body. Alright, so I've got that. So now I want to work on grabbing the letters. Now, like I said before, if I were to tap it, you're going to grab this item here. So one way to not have to worry about that is really just tapping the little eye icon and it hides that item, and then you don't have to worry about accidentally touching it. If there is a lock function here in Shapr, I have not found it. It would be a nice addition, but I've not found it where you can lock a shape where it's not touched. And it could be I'm just missing it. Alright, so let's go with bringing up the letters. So I'm going to grab, and I'm just going to start by doing this portion here. Oops, no. Maybe you have to zoom in to make sure you grab. There we go. So I've got some crossing going on. Whoops. Make sure I've got everything I need. Yep, I knew I missed a little spot right here because these letters intersect. There we go. Alright. So I've got my little Labcraft Studio name and I want to bring this up. So I'm going to pull. And say I want to bring this up. Let's say 4.5 millimeters. Do it half of that. There we go. So that's now there. And then if I were to go back and turn the other item back on, you'll see now we've got. Cool. Now I have a suspicion when this came in that it always makes, depending on what your measurements are, sometimes the sketch can be super huge. So I will fix that at the end though. So I've got that extruded. So now I'm going to get the last of my little parts. So I'm going to go ahead and just at least turn this body off so it's not problematic. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and hide everything real quick. Actually, a good way to do this actually would be to tap and select all of them. And I'm going to set these in a folder by creating an icon in the background. And then I can just hide it. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to get the rest of these little parts here. Sometimes you have to really zoom in to make sure you get the faces that you want, or the parts of the sketch that you want to turn into faces. There we go. So I got my little dude. Grab the star. Grab most of the studio words. I'm just going to grab these extra little shapes here. Nope. There we go. Alright. And then I'm going to drag these up. I'm going to drag this up to 6. And it's thinking about it. There we go. Alrighty. Cool. I'm going to tap off. And you'll see it created multiple items. So I'm just going to grab all of these. And I am going to toss them into this folder. And then I'm going to turn my folder on. Ta-da! There we have it. Pretty nice. So that would be an example of how you can bring in a sketch and create whatever shape you wanted, or create designs from it and extrude them out. Now, looking at this and looking at the measurements over here, each of these boxes is 10 millimeters, so this is a pretty big design. So I definitely want this to be smaller. If I'm going to maybe say make it as a keychain, would be an example. So what I can do is if I tap the folder, I can then, that enables me to select everything and then be able to scale it down. So if I tap scale, I can do it non-uniform, or I can do it uniform. Now, I really just want it to scale on the X and Y. I want to leave the Z-axis, the height that I have things the same. So you want to be on whatever screen. So for instance, I'm here on the top, so I'm playing with the X and Y, which is the ones I want to manipulate. If I were to say maybe go and do it from the front, then it's going to be playing with the X, but it's also going to be playing with the Z. So you can only really scale with two together at once based on wherever you are with the gizmo. You can do one at a time. So for instance, if I grab the top one here, I can just reduce it one at a time and that'll shrink it that way. But I'm going to undo. At least I'm going to try and undo. There we go. I just want this to be scaled with the X and Y. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to tap scale. Then I know I want this to be so 25 millimeters is roughly the equivalent of 1 inch. If you want to get really technical, it's 25.6. So, and if I even wanted to, I can change this. It's like, hey, I want to look at inches, and that tells me right now this is where my grid size is, which is a little funky, but it'll help me if I'm trying to figure out where I am measurement-wise. Okay, so this is 1 inch grid. So each of these boxes is 1 inch, so obviously this came in much bigger than it needed to be. So I really need to scale this down. So I'm going to tap off my sketch so I don't see it in the background, and then I'm going to just start scaling down quite a bit. And I can either drag and drop, or drag the measurements, or I can even go in here and tap and tell it what I want. So for instance, let's maybe just go 0.2 and see where we are. Okay. So now suddenly one big box is 1 inch. So that's about roughly 1, 2, 3. So this is about 4 inches. Let's go, maybe go down one more. Okay, so now this is, if I go over to move, let's say I want to just, so I can get a better idea of what it looks like size-wise, I can line it up here. So now this is where the keychain is less than 2 inches. And only about 1 inch in height. So not, you know, not super big, but doing that at least helps me a little bit with scaling. So I know I want to make it a little bigger. And you can always go back the opposite direction if you want to. So for instance, if I'm thinking about this, maybe I want it to be, and yeah, it scales from the center, so this is a little bit bigger. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, close. Let me go with like 1.75. Yeah, we'll go with that. All right, and I'm gonna go back over to millimeters because it's just a little more intuitive. All right. Now you can really see the height of things a little bit better. So this is still 3 millimeters. This is still 4.5. And this is 6, obviously. But it lets you see it a little bit better. Gives you a better idea of how thick things are, or if you wanted to maybe bring them down a little bit. So for instance, I'm working with a keychain. Do I really want it to be, you know, 6 millimeters thick? Do I maybe want it to be a little less? I can always grab these shapes all over again, these faces. Like for instance, maybe if I want to do like this part here, I can always re-grab these shapes and change how tall they are. So like maybe I just want it to be, I don't know, say 5 millimeters. You know, not quite as thick. And then I'm gonna go over here and grab my little Cthulhu guy. Make sure I'm actually grabbing the faces and not the lines. If you're having trouble grabbing something, you can always zoom in a bit. There we go. All right. I think maybe I set them to 5, if I remember correctly. And if you really want, the farther down the closer you are to the model, the more precise you can do with the drag and dropping versus just putting it in. So I think 5 is going to be what I'm going to do for that. So it looks pretty good. Looks like I missed the eye here. Yep. I'm going to drop that to 5. There we go. Or if I wanted to, I can even go further. Let's grab all my letters. No, not the lines. Faces. There we go. I have this set at 1, 2, 4.5. I want this to be just 4. There we go. So we go. So 3, 4, and 5. Cool. Alright. So now I've got, that's how you use sort of the extrude function, and that's how you would do it with a imported sketch. Now I can go in and make additional changes to this, add things to it. For instance, like I said, I want this to maybe be a keychain. So what would be a good way to make a keychain? Well, I'm going to need a hole for, you know, whatever ring I want to attach to it. So how do I go about doing that? Well, the easiest way to do that is, again, creating a sketch and then using that to make a hole. So for instance, I'm going to add a sketch. Shh. So I've got this open and you can see it. And this looks like might be an area where I need to add a bigger sketch, like add an additional area to the keychain and then use that to make a hole. So for instance, I've got this here. So I'm just gonna do a simple circle. And I'm going to pull out from here. Oh, I've got extra here. Before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and just delete that sketch that I already had. I don't need it right now. I don't need it anymore. It's just gonna get in my way. All right, so I'm gonna sketch. And I'm gonna just create, oops, make sure I grab my circle tool. So I'm just gonna drag and pull a circle out. I'm more interested in the circle over here. So I'm gonna say this is 10 millimeters. And then I am going to go ahead and just move it. Disconnect any of my constraints for some reason. I'm going to move. There we go. So I'm going to move it. And for instance, I want this circle to kind of be center with this shape. So I want to basically take this point and this line, and I want to create a constraint to it. Where'd my constraint tools go? There we go. Gotta get off the move. So I want these two to be constrained a little bit. So I want to create, got this line. I'm gonna create another line. I'm just gonna draw straight little line. I'm going to tap this line and this line, and I am going to make it perpendicular, but then I want this line and this line. I want draw a line to here. And I want those to be equal. And then that moved at point. Okay, there we go. So now I know where the center is for that. So now I'm going to take my circle and I am going to line it up and have it snap over there. There we go. And then just kind of move it wherever I feel like would work. I feel like that works pretty well. Could even maybe go a little further. Yeah, that works. Okay. Alright. Tapped off. I'm gonna just drop this line real quick. I don't need it. Okay. So now I'm gonna take that circle and I'm going to offset it, and I'm gonna bring it in with the idea that I'm kind of creating an additional shape for my little hole for the keychain. So I'm gonna go with, let's make this about 2 millimeters. Yeah. There we go. That works. All right. So now I have this additional area that I need to basically extrude up. So I'm gonna tap this circle. And I know I need to bring it up to 3. There we go. Voila. Now I want this to be connected to the bigger body, so I'm going to tap this shape, double tap this shape, double tap this shape, and I want to union them. I want them to be together. And you can, one of the nice things is, especially if you're doing things where you're using a shape as like a cut or such, you can keep the originals on or off. So for instance, I don't need the originals, I want them all to be one shape. So there we go. All right. So now I have a nice little design. I think looks pretty good. I don't know, I still feel like this is too big. It's 5. I think I'm gonna make it 4. I think I'm gonna make it 4.5. Just make it slightly bigger. Which means then I'm gonna need to go in here and get all these. There we go. Oops. And I'm going to set that to 4.5 as well. Cool. All right. So there you go. Nice nifty little shape. All right. So once I have a shape, or anything you're done, creating, you can always then from there go on and export it. And the export is, if you tap the little 3-dot icon up here, you have the export options, and you have the option to create various different exports. You can do 3D models of different qualities. If you're doing a 3D print, you can select this, although both the 3MF and the STL are also available in the 3D model. You actually have the ability to play in with like augmented reality and all of that, or even just export sketches if you like have something here that you want to take into other software. So various different options to play with, but most of the time I am exporting in 3MF format, and that's in part because it just kind of creates a better image, but it also lets you kind of have multiple parts of an item, which is really nice when you're going into software like, for instance, the Bamboo Slicer that lets you kind of color different items. That makes life a little bit easier. So, but that's how I would go about doing that, naming it and all that. So that would be where you would go there. But let me just show you kind of the ability to do color within Shapr3D. So I have this keychain that I've made. I can actually color it if I want to get a visual of what it looks like here in Shapr as well. So before I do that, let me hide my layers. So let's go over to the visualization tool. So now what it's done is it's kind of created this little image. It's even got a shadow and all of that. And this is great, especially because you have the ability, if you want to capture an image or even some augmented reality, which helps you if you're maybe wanting to show people like a prototype idea. So I'm going to start. Now, it starts off with like a default material, but you've got lots of different options. And it really is just kind of the finish that you're working with. Most of the time, you can even do woods and such if you're doing more like, say if you're designing a cabinet or such, you can get woods. There's glass, that's an option, some stones, leather, fabric even. There's lots of different options. Most of the time, I just kind of stick to a matte texture. So, I'm actually gonna pick this one. There we go. And then once you because I mean I'm printing in PLA, but PLA isn't really an option, and ABS and PLA are going to kind of look the same here in the visualization. So once I have, so I'm going to just kind of select and drag it. You can just drag and drop, but I'm going to go ahead and change this color because I'm going to I usually do the base in white. So I've got that. And then I can turn around, and if I want, I can drag it to other materials. So for instance, like say I want to drag it there. And say I want this then to be black. There we go. So that looks good. And then I can drag it on to other shapes as I go. Gives it a little bit of a texture. If I want something different, I guess maybe I want to do that instead. And they all kind of have a texture in general, so. There we go. So I'm going to keep continuing with my little coloring here real quick. I don't want to bore you guys too much. And yeah, it's a little... Just pretty much drag and drop. Kind of hard when it's blurry like this. I think some of it is probably the processing power at the moment. Or could even be blur intensity down a little bit. There we go. You can actually control how the camera looks. That's better. Alright, so almost there. I'm going to, if I want to, grab one more and then say I want to do the letters. And you can, do these multiple colors and such. I think I'm just going to leave it red for now and just drag and drop on all these letters. But the little logo I've worked on obviously had a bunch of different colors, but I'm not going to do that, especially because these two letters are connected and that would be a bit of a pain to try and separate out. But I can at least go in here and change it out a little bit like that. There we go. So now you can see, you can visualize what you're doing, which gives you an idea of how it's going to look before then you create a prototype in modeling. And then once you're done, you can tap visualization, you go back to modeling, and those colors will actually stay, which is really nice when you're wanting to get a little bit of an idea of what something looks like or how to divide parts, but you're not worrying, it's not laying the textures, it's just kind of coloring the items. Okay, so that's how you might do a shape if you're bringing in like a sketch from another program. But there are other things you can do, so I'm just going to go ahead and erase that. I can also create 3D shapes from sketches that I build in here, like I said earlier, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. So let's go here. Let's say I want to draw... Let's just say I want to draw a bunny. I'm just going to go with that. So if I think about a bunny, I'm thinking I want the bunny to be have a cute little head. So I'm going to start here with, you might think it's a little weird that I'm starting with squares, but just trust me on my thought process here. So I'm going to start with the head, and then I'm going to make couple of ears, and let's say, let's go with these. We'll go with little 30 ears. Okay. So I'm going to start with that. It might seem strange that I'm just starting with squares, but follow me on this a little bit. So I'm going to extrude the shape that I want. So I want, this is a 100 by 100 square, so I'm going to bring this up 100 as well. So I now have a square. Now, part of the reason for doing this is because spheres are kind of hard to create in Shapr3D, but there is a workaround for that. So what you do is you actually can grab the sides of this item. And you can do what's known as chamfer fillet, which is where you can pull and round things off, or go this way to create more of an internal cutaway. So for instance, in this case, I want to create a sphere, and since I had a 100 by 100 box, the radius is going to be 50 mils. So that creates my sphere. So that's going to be my bunny's head. So I'm going to do that, and then I am going to create the ears. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to pull these up real quick, and let's say these are 30 as well. That looks cute. That looks like the right shape. So I'm going to round these out a little bit as well, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to kind of do one side at a time. Or one. I'm gonna do it this way, create sort of a round shape. There we go. So I've got two cylinders. And then, for instance, I want to create maybe a circular top. Lost my lines. Here we go. All right, I'm gonna chamfer those a little bit as well. Should be, it'll usually tell you when you, so again, we knew it was 30, so 15 should be your stopping point. So that gives me these little round little edges, okay. All right, so that's kind of my basic parts. So let's say maybe I want, select this edge. So maybe I want this edge to be a little thinner. So I'm going to actually scale this. So I want to work, I'm going to hide my circle for a moment. I want to work on making this a little bit smaller. Maybe only 60%, 70%, that'll work. And by doing that, it's kind of shrunk it down a little bit. And actually what I'm going to do, because I can mirror shape as well, I'm going to show you guys how you do that. Alright, so now I've got this shape, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this body, and I'm going to scale it as well. I'm going to go to the front. I want the bunny's ears to maybe be a little flatter. So I'm going to flatten it a little bit this way. Maybe, yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so now I've got flattened a little bit here. That's cute. Maybe I want the bunny ear up here to be a little bit wider. So I'm gonna grab, nope, not this point, I'm gonna grab the line. Alright. I'll scale again. And make sure on the right plane. And I'm going to grab and I'm going to scale a little bit. Maybe I want it to just be I like working in even numbers. There we go. And that scaled it up. It seems like it's a little less round here on the top, so what I can do is I can, if I want to, maybe I feel like maybe these needed to be scaled. There we go. Maybe I just want that up round a little bit as well. There we go. Okay. And then maybe I want this to be a little rounder so it looks more like an ear rather than just like a very rigid shape. You can, again, just kind of go ahead and chamfer and smooth this out. You're only going to be able to go yay so far with most shapes. And sometimes you can't even go anywhere with a shape. Here we go. It'll usually tell you when you fail. So it looks like 9. No. 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. But that's a little rounder. I could keep doing it and probably get it rounder if I wanted. Sometimes it doesn't let me blend at all, but that gives me a slightly rounder shape from a little bunny ear. Now, say I want to maybe cut out a portion of this shape. Like I'm looking at it and you know how bunny ears kind of have a bit of a curve. I can do that as well. I'm gonna take a moment and I feel like I can probably curve this a little bit. Maybe. There we go. Makes it a little smoother. Okay. I feel like I can take this and cut a portion of it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, I'm actually going to just make a copy of this shape. You can do that by tapping the copy button and then moving up, and it's created an additional shape. So now I've got the copy. Make sure you then tap the copy off, otherwise each time you drag and drop it's going to think you want an extra copy, and I don't want that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to drag and then I'm going to just rotate and I'm going to move it a little bit. I want to kind of sort of cut out a portion of this. And I'm just kind of taking advantage of the pre-existing shape a little bit. And yeah. See that? Maybe a little more. Yeah, I think that'll work. Okay. So from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap my first item, and I'm going to tap my second item, and I'm going to do subtract. And it'll show me which item it's keeping and which item it's not keeping. And I have the ability, actually, if I want, I can tap this and keep originals of either all of them, the removed bodies, or, you know, just the... Like if I want both of them, it will let me keep it. If I do it this way with nothing on, I'm going to be left with a single shape. Or if I want to, and I want to say maybe keep a backup copy of like the original shape that wasn't cut away, you can do that. So I'm going to do that just as a level of safe, or kind of a safety measure. So now you don't see anything, but if I tap off my previous item, which was my backup, you'll now see I've got this little kind of cut out curved shape. And it's got some sharp edges, so I'm going to go ahead and grab these really quick. Make sure I grab the entire loop. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to make these a little softer. Think on it for a moment. Apparently no. I need to slightly soft little edge so it looks a little rounded. When I told it to, it said, and I tapped off. There we go. Cool. So now I've got this curved shape. Alright, so let's turn my bunny head back on, which is really just kind of a globe. But I can now put ears on my bunny. So an easy way to do this would be, I'm going to actually take, and I'm going to put this body in the center of my origin so that I can mirror the ear to the opposite side. So I've got that where I want it, and I'm going to tap my ear. And I'm going to go ahead and just drag it down, drag it over. Zoom in. There we go. And this is why working on moving things in just a 2D plane works much better. I'm going to go ahead and just angle my bunny ear, maybe about 15 degrees. Get where I think would look cute. You don't want to go any more further. Okay. Then I'm going to go over here to the right. Yep. Because now I want to go up and make sure the bunny ear is roughly in plane. And I'm gonna maybe angle it so that it's a little. Okay. And then I can move in 3D space, see how this looks. Do I like it? Do I like it from the front? Do you think it looks pretty good there? I think it does. Okay, so I'm gonna tap off. Alright, so I got one ear. So now I want the second ear. And rather than putting a second one in place, an easy thing to do would be to do what you call the mirror function. So if you tap an item and you tap more, you can mirror an item. And you can mirror an item over an axis or usually a mirroring plane. So you'll see there's these little squares here, and these represent the different axes. So I want to mirror it over the up and down plane, so I'm going to tap that one. As you can see, the minute I do that, I've got my second ear in place, and it makes things much easier when you definitely get your item on the origin. So there we go. And keep originals on or off. Like if I'm just moving an item, I could do it that way, but because I want two ears, I'm going to leave it on, and then tap OK. Alright, so now I got a little bunny head. It's kind of cute. Ish. Okay. So, what else do we need? So we need body for the bunny and arms and all of that. I don't know how much of that I'm going to do today, since it's just kind of playing around with the basics a little bit with you guys. But I will show you how to, another thing that I found that's really helpful is putting the ability to sketch onto items. So, for instance, say I want to put, here. So for instance, say I want to put eyes on my bunny. And if I were to create a sketch and draw on a flat pane, the eyes are going to kind of look a little bugged out. They're not going to quite line up. I want them to actually kind of line up along this smooth round surface. And one of the ways you can do that is by actually creating a construction plane, a place where you're going to draw on top of the item, well, perpendicular to the item. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to tap add, and I am going to tap a construction plane. So you can do all sorts of options. You can do a mid-plane, 3 points, curve at a certain point, or in my case, I'm going to use parallel to face. So you're going to select a face that you want to start sketching. So I'm going to grab this one over here. So That's the item I want. I tap next, and it's like it wants me to select a point, essentially, on this plane where it wants me to put the sketch. So I'm gonna take a moment and just kind of maybe use my gizmo a little bit to rotate a bit and kind of look and decide where exactly I want it to be. I'm gonna just go with this right here. That works. Looks like it'll be a good spot for the eyes. I'm gonna tap done. There we go. So now I've created a plane against my little sketch, and what I can do is I can actually, if I want to sketch on that plane, I can tap it and I can click sketch, and it's gonna jump to that. So that's really nice. So now I have this flat surface that I've created in space, and I can draw on it. And then from there I will be able to actually project it onto my little, be able to extrude and put it onto my little bunny. So let me give you an example. So I've got my little sketch plane, and let's just do some cute little kawaii style eyes. So one of the ones I like to do is just this little, I'm going to draw a curve and, make a cute eye. So I have a little cute little curve, and then I'm going to just rotate it a little bit, kind of sort of position it where I think it would look good. And then I'm going to offset it. And by offsetting it, I can drag it down to make however thick I want it to be. There we go. And then I'm going to just really quickly finish it by drawing an arc and a circle. Okay. So now I have this cute little eye sketch that I've put in place on this plane. That's, exit sketching that you can see is essentially in space a little bit. Grab the curve here, you can kind of see it. Yep, see how it's right there and it's directly on line. So now I'm going to extrude it. So I'm going to tap, and I'm going to go down, and it's going to, obviously when I do that, it's going to want to try and go through and slice. Or I go up. Say I want it to be out, I don't want it to be out very much, I just want it to be out to like 1 millimeter. So that's good. There we go. Now you'll notice that if I were to do it that way, you'll notice it's not exactly on the bunny. I want it to actually be going the opposite direction. I want it to go down. Now if I do that, it's like, well, it doesn't want to do that. Well, if I tap this little circular thing right next to the little extrusion measurement, it gives me the option to change what I'm doing. So for instance, say I want a new body. That'll let me create a new body even if it is potentially going through. Here we go. So I don't want it to be a very big body. Maybe I'll go a little bit further just so I have something to work with. Okay. And then tap off. Cool. And now it's just a matter of kind of adjusting the eye in its position. I'm going to turn the plane off, and I'm going to turn my sketch plane off so it's just a little easier to see. So that way I can grab my little eyeball and I can just do some tweaking, like with rotating a little bit. Maybe it just needs to be rotated a little bit this way. And I think rotated a little bit this way as well. Kind of checking. I want to basically make sure it's actually completely touching the shape. And all that. And some of this is a little dependent on where on the sphere you had drawn it. So, for instance, maybe I want to just keep it in a little bit there. Oops. There we go. So I'm just trying to position it a little bit, and once I kind of get it where I want it, and if I want to bring it down, maybe make it a little flatter to the surface, then I can bring it down a bit. Cool. Alright, and then the last thing I want to do is curve this out a little bit. There we go. I feel like I need to rotate the shape maybe just a little bit this way. Maybe not that much. That looks good. Maybe it needs to be rotated this way. Not even that much. There. Cute. So I got my little eye on the bunny. So now I'm going to make a copy, and I'm going to use that same mirroring function. So I'm going to grab my eye, more, mirror. I'm going to select that axis and click done. And there we have it. We've got this little silly looking bunny. So you can do modeling in this. It's not as intuitive as if you were constructing maybe more rigid shapes. So, but it can definitely be done. So I'm gonna grab all my shapes. I'm gonna put them in a folder together so they're easier to work with. And then I'm looking from the top. I want my bunny to be rotated real quick so that he's actually right side up. So there we go. Because it's a little bunny head. And say that maybe I want to make it so that he sits on a table without falling off. And since it's round, it would help if I were to maybe make one of the edges a little bit flat. So I'm just going to kind of get him into place a little bit here just to make it easy. But I'm going to kind of maybe cut off the bottom a little bit. So I think that'll work. So I'm going to go ahead and create another sketch plane. And I'm just going to draw a rectangle along the base here. Nothing exciting. Because then what I can do is I can turn around and just cut off. Sometimes it likes to be a pain, so if I want to, and if it wants to be a pain, I can do subtract, or if I just want to do it real quick and grab. There we go. And then I grab that one. There we go. Oh, that's why it's not wanting to do it. Now I know what my problem was. I feel stupid. I created a new shape. I actually just want to extrude this off. No, won't let me do. Says no. Oh, that's why. Go out here, let me go to my sketch plane. And I'm just going to create a shape. Actually, I need to go the other way. There we go. Now, if I were to grab this one and then that one, subtract. There we go. Okay. So I got my little bunny. Lost my eye. Where'd my eye go? Oh, nope, I know what it is. I didn't turn him on. Okay. So there we go. Simple little bunny head. So I hope that this helps a little bit on how to work with Shapr, and if there's additional things you guys want me to try and kind of teach. For modeling, this, works pretty well again when you're using more rigid things. But I mean, if you're into maybe more clay modeling, like I feel like trying to create a bunny head or such might be easier in something like Blender or even Nomad Sculpt, where you're really kind of pulling and pushing the shape. It gives you a more organic look, because it is a bit harder to get an organic look in Shapr3D. You can kind of get close, but it's still ultimately, this is working with more planes. But the idea was, tutorial. Hopefully maybe this would help a little bit. Here, give the bunny a little color. There we go. But you can do some cute shapes, so. Alright. So anyway, I think that's gonna wrap up my stream for today. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I mean, again, I'm still kind of learning how to do this and do this live, so you don't get the fancy editing where you don't hear the fact that I say the word so and over and over again. But it's just kind of a different environment. It's a hangout, chit chat when you get a chance, or try and work with things together. So this was Shapr. I'm going to do other software as well. In fact, I really wanted to learn Blender for some time, and I think it would be kind of fun to sort of do a Let's Learn where we're learning Blender and kind of going through some tutorials with online, whether we're like doing the donut or something like that. But I mean, basically the idea is to let's work together. And, if we need to ask questions to each other, we can kind of do that. So anyway, I hope this has been